afternoon to you. Welcome on in. It's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com. Brought to you, as always, by the folks at Ameren, Illinois, Gray Bar, and Munganass St. Louis Acura. I'm Joe Roderick, joined alongside by Mike Claiborne and Claibs here on this Monday, the last Monday in the month of November. Just so much Cardinal news already as John Mozeliak goes out today and gets his, I guess we could say, his big free agent signing, the big free agent signing of the Cardinals offseason. But Sonny Gray, 3 years, $75 million.
Well, you know what? It's his biggest free agent signing so far. And I think that's how you have to look at it. Now, that doesn't mean that there's another guy that's out there that he's going to spend even more money on, although maybe that's possible because you've now invested close to $50 million on 3 pitchers. And I think, when you look at the average of that, that's what, about $20 million a pop. That's par for the course right now. But there's some other needs for sure. I think he kind of shores up the signing of Sonny Gray. He kind of shores up the front end of the rotation. I'm not sure if I would say Sonny Gray is a number one, but you know what? Maybe you have a couple of number twos. Maybe you have 3 number twos in your rotation. So I think you have to look at it like that because let's face it, this is all about getting the postseason. And when we get to postseason, you need at least 2, perhaps 3, and the rest of those guys shift to the bullpen.
I mean, you have starters now next year. You have, last year, I don't think you and I did the show. The Lynn and the Gibson signing happened after we did the show. Or no, we did the Lance Lynn. We talked Lance Lynn, then Gibson happened the next day. And now you have 3 guys now that can go out there and throw 180 innings. They just did. They just went out there and they threw 180 innings instead of having to piece together. This is the hope of this is, the hope of guys like Lynn and Gibson are so you're not having to rely and go, okay, do we need Jake Woodford? Do we need Drew Rom? Do we need just, whoever the number 3 is in Memphis to come up this year? Or who's scheduled to start in Springfield tomorrow that we're going to go out and sign? You've gone out and you have got guys that you now hope can go out there and pitch every 5th day for you to where you're not piecing it together. And it's just a bit of a mess like it was at the end of last season.
I think you're spot on. I think that this is something that we learned firsthand does not work. So you have guys that can give you at least 180 innings, but you also have a very interesting group of leaders where we have Sonny Gray, who led the league in fewest home runs. We also have Lance Lynn, who led the league in most home runs. Miles Michaelis is in one of those categories as far as hits surrendered. So, I mean, it's a very interesting collection of pitchers that all know how to pitch. I don't think anybody's going to argue the fact they all know how to pitch. I think the mindset will be different with these guys because you have a couple of guys, this is their last contract for sure. Well, all 3 of them, this is their last contract. So they want to go out and do their thing the right manner. And I think the key is, first of all, staying healthy.
Yeah.
And fortunately, these 3 guys have been healthy for the most part of their career. So I would expect nothing less than this year for them to give you at least 28 to 30 starts.
I mean, the reason that these guys led in those categories is because they went out there and they pitched every 5th day, because they went out there and they threw the most. I mean, you're not, Madison Bumgarner isn't in the running for most hits allowed and most home runs allowed this year because he was so bad last year. The Diamondbacks said, go away, and nobody else wanted to pick him up. So that's why you get guys that are going to be consistent. You know what would have happened if the Cardinals would have added the league leader in walks last year? If they would have added him to the rotation and, just mixed it in with home runs and hits and all that, they would have signed
25 games out.
They would have signed Blake Snell. That's who they would have signed. He led the league in walks last year and he won the Cy Young. So you go through and you look at guys that compile those numbers. It's because they're consistent guys that go out there and they pitch for you. And all 3 have playoff experience. So that's what you're building this year.
We have a special guest who's going to tell us a little bit more about Sonny Gray. So let's bring him into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Formerly here in St. Louis, now up in Minnesota. We welcome on Ahmad Hicks, who's now with Fox 9 Sports up in Minnesota. Ahmad, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you guys for having me. Glad to be here.
good to see you, man. I'm glad things are. Do you have a nice coat for Minneapolis at this time of the year, man? I mean, I know
Yeah,
that's the
you know
first thing
what?
you had to do.
We were just talking about it the other day. It's starting to get colder here, but there's no snow. Last year when I moved here in October, there was snow within 2 weeks of me moving here, and it didn't melt until about April. So we're doing good right now. Not a lot of snow. Haven't had to whip out the big parka just yet.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the most recent acquisition of the Cardinals. You had a chance to see him on a regular basis, and that's Sonny Gray, a guy I coveted from last year. Watching him pitch and then following his numbers, he seemed like just the right guy for St. Louis. What did you see in him?
Well, for him, I just think he was a leader. I think what he instilled in this team was confidence. Dating back to spring training prior to the start of this season, he told our sports director, Jim Rich, he said, all we want to do is win this year. He said, that's all I'm focused on is winning. And I think in years past, not years past, the one season with Minnesota prior to last season, they kind of capped out his innings and the amount of, times they would let him go deep into games and things like this. So in some terms, he was unleashed this season, kind of just let it rip, go out there and do what you have to do. He's not a guy that's a high velo guy that's going to touch 98,
Right.
99, things like that. But the breaking ball and the movement on his breaking balls, I won't say it's an Adam Wainwright type breaking ball, but it has similar type movement. And I think for the Cardinals, they need a guy that's confident at the top of that rotation, someone who can say, like, I'm going out there and we're going to win when I get on the mound. And I think that's what the Cardinals miss. I didn't watch a lot of games last season, but just the years past, that I covered them, I think they missed that bulldog type mentality. And I think that's what Sonny Gray possesses.
As you bring up Sonny Gray and his leadership, we saw him when he was in Cincinnati. And you're right about the fact that he could be that rusty nail along with Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, guys that we haven't had in this clubhouse in a long, long time. You mentioned his control. I mean, he throws that sweeper.
Yes.
And it's so far so good because very few people are able to square it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you go back to opening day this year versus the Astros, I believe he went 7 innings and struck out 13 batters. So, I mean, it just shows you the type of work that he can do. The postseason, he was okay, versus the Toronto Blue Jays. I think, 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, no earned runs, 6 strikeouts. Struggled against the Astros when he can't place that breaking ball, that sweeper where he wants to place it, and batters connect with it. Well, it's bad news, especially with that velo not being as high as it needs, as it once used to be. So for him, I think it's all about placement. I think it's all about control. I think it's all about going out there and having that confidence that you can get the job done. And I think that's what he did. He had a 8-8 record this time, this past season in 32 starts. The Twins always had a chance to win when he was on the mound, and that's what you ask for out of your starting pitcher.
Yeah, Ahmad, you mentioned in the postseason against the Blue Jays, this was the most innings that he had pitched in about 8 years. The 184 previously in his career had reached 200 twice, very early in his career. So was Claibs, you had mentioned this so much during the postseason. These guys, these top free agents that were tacking on the innings once they got into October. Did you see some of that wear and tear? How do you think it's going to affect him into when he gets in here February and March and into the start of the next season?
I really don't think it was a lot of wear and tear. You think like the wild card, that's just a 5-game series, and then he only had another outing in the division series. So I think for him, just going out there, it was a chance to show himself that he still has the juice, that he still could be a day one, plug and play guy, number one at the top of the rotation. So I don't think fatigue was really a big deal in the postseason, whereas it's like the Astros were just on fire and they were connecting with everything in that series versus them. And it was just everybody was a tough out. And I think we saw that with all the Twins, pitchers. But I think Sonny Gray, I don't think fatigue was a problem. And I don't think it'll be a problem with the Cardinals. I think he's excited to go out there, get the ball every 5 days and show like, hey, I can be the leader of this team. And I think with the, pieces that the Cardinals have, especially the bats, there's no telling where he can go, because in a lot of games this year, he didn't get a lot of run support, early in the season from the Twins bats. The Twins bats were one of the worst in the major leagues in the first half of the season. So, he probably would have had a lot more wins had they, had production at the plate.
Ahmad, I'm going to agree with you on the innings issue, because I think innings eaten up by guys who really throw hard, I think it catches up to them a lot sooner than it does guys who just let it come out of their hand. And he throws a lot of breaking balls, so it doesn't put as much stress on the shoulder and the arm as it would for a guy who's trying to hit 98 all the time.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, like he doesn't have that velo like he used to be. And that's why Adam Wainwright was so successful for so long, because he could place the ball where he needed to place the ball, have that type of break that he needed to have, or just have that, 75, 80 mile per hour pitch, at the right time. And I think with Sonny Gray, he's like you said, he's not going out there maxing out every single game, nor is he going out there pitching 8 to 9 innings. He's giving you a solid 5 to 7 innings, which is what you can ask for. And I think a guy that'll be around for the long term. He didn't have any long-term injury issues this season. So I think that's something to look forward to if you're a Cardinals fan.
With the Vikings playing Monday night, are people in Minnesota going to notice that Sonny Gray signed somewhere else today?
No, absolutely not. The whole timeline is just buzzing about the game tonight. Justin Jefferson, him returning after the bye. These are some very loyal and crazy fans up here. You walk around on game day, and everywhere you go, you'll see a Vikings jersey. So people are pretty excited for game day right now.
Well, think about who they're playing, too. They got to be licking their chops about tonight.
Well, I don't think they can lick their chops with anybody that they play because they always play down to their opponent, and they're always in one-score games. And with Josh Dobbs, he's still, I won't say is proven as a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's shown flashes. He certainly has a lot of buzz around him and has the city buzzing. But, can you go out there day in and day out? And can you do it, each and every week? And I think that's the thing about being a good quarterback in the NFL. So still a lot of answers for the Vikings right now. Yeah, everything is in front of them right now, but we all know anything can happen in the NFL.
I want to switch up and talk a little NBA with you because the T-Wolves have always been a head scratcher of a team as far as I'm concerned. They got the two bigs up front. They have Anthony Edwards, who I think is one of the most dynamic players nobody talks about. If you put him in a different market, then he's on the face of a lot of people's cereal boxes the next day. What is the problem, man? Because they just can't seem to push it to the next level, and they've got enough pieces.
I think last year it was the injury bug with Karl Anthony Towns missing a plethora of games and them not getting a chance to really mesh. But I think it was also about identity. Cat still wanted it to be his team. He still wanted those moments late in the game. And I think Anthony Edwards, I won't say was passive, but I still think he was just trying to be a team first guy because that's what he is. You guys see his interviews, like what he portrays in those interviews is how he is in that locker room. He's just really true to himself. I think now we're stepping into that. This is Anthony Edwards' team time now. I think he knows that. He's embracing that. He knows he's a top 10 talent in the NBA right now, especially if he keeps up this level of play that he's at right now. So I think right now you see a level of a year of them meshing and, the level of things picking up because of their expectations of being around one another. They're like, look, we played with you last year. We know what you're capable of. This is what we're capable of when we do these things and when we run our offense this type of way. And I think that's why they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference right now because they had that year to kind of bond and get that continuity. And it's going through Anthony Edwards. That's the big change from the recent years.
Yeah.
Things used to go through Cat, and now they have Mike Conley in there to say, hey, here's the ball, Ant. Do what you got to do, And it's a max contract year for him. He needs to make an All-Pro team, All NBA team, in order to get that extra $40+ million. So he's very motivated right now.
Well, he's a really good player, and I tell you, Mike Conley Jr. is one of the more professional athletes you're going to ever encounter. So his leadership is going to hopefully make that team better. All right, final question for me. Blues are in town. They get the Wild tomorrow night. On Tuesday night. What are the Blues going to see with the Minnesota Wild other than Kaprizov? Because he's one of the more dynamic players in the game right now, too.
A gritty, scrappy team. I still think it's early in the season. They're still trying to find their identity right now. I think, they go as far as Gus takes them, Gustafson. If he's having a great day, then the Wild are going to be a really good team. If he's struggling in that, they're going to be a team that struggles, especially with the defense in front of them. So Kirill Kaprizov has to lead them. And everybody else that they have on that team. I can't say that we've been watching a lot of hockey with football season going on and the Gophers football and stuff like that. So I haven't really done my homework on them as well as I should have. But I think they go as Gus.
You just said more than most people would say here in St. Louis. So you're in good. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, so I think they go as far as the goalie, though. As we all know, in NHL, your successful teams have really good goaltenders, and I think he can be up and down, a little spotty, but when he's on, they're on.
Ahmad, thank you, man, so much for jumping on and joining us, talking a little Sonny Gray and touching on some of the other things as well.
No problem. Always happy to talk Cardinals baseball. Wish you guys well. Hopefully, you guys can get back in the postseason. So hopefully, our worlds can collide in the postseason next year.
Well, it's a whole lot of collisions going to have to take place for us to collide with the Minnesota
Trust me, I
Twins
know.
for a lot of different reasons. No additions to the family. You still down to one, or have we expanded the family?
No, still just at one right now. Got the baby boy Houston, 21 months now. He'll be 2 in February. He's talking, he's walking, he's remembering things, he's repeating words now and phrases. So
good words, I hope.
Good words, great words. No bad language around the
Not
kid.
yet.
Not yet. And he has an unbreakable bond with the German Shepherd Ace, our dog. So everything's good right now.
All right, man. Well, it's great to have you part of what we do. Continued health and success, and hopefully we'll see you when it warms up.
All right, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
There you go, Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9 up in Minnesota, taking some time to talk to us on the Ameren Illinois Lunch Show here with Claibs and Joe. And Claibs, as we talked a little bit about Sonny Gray, we talked a little bit in the opening too about just the way the team looks right now. And getting back into it, John Mozeliak said he said that they were going to go out, they were going to go after 3 arms. They went out and they got 3 arms. They get Lance Lynn, you get Kyle Gibson, you get Sonny Gray. Right now, if you look at what the projected rotation would be for the team next year with Gray and Michaelis there on top, and then you fill it in with Lynn, Gibson, and Matz, they're not done. This is not going to be the rotation to start the year. And quite frankly, I think they still have 2 more guys that they're going to sign to this rotation, or they're going to add to this rotation before we get to opening day.
I think there's a distinct possibility of that taking place, but I also think you have to turn your head and look at the bullpen too and shore that up. Now, some of those names that you have on this list, maybe they slide to the bullpen, maybe Steven Matz, unless you can find somebody else to replace him. What about Matthew Liberatore? I mean, I think if the Cardinals learned one thing last year, you never start the season with enough pitching. Mm-hmm. And I really realize now that they probably want more pitching, excuse me, that has legitimate big league experience. You know, if you're going to bring up a guy, he's going to start his career off in the bullpen. I don't see him being a starter. So you have people like Graceffo, you have Liberatore, and there's some other guys internally.
Drew Rom.
Drew Rom. Internally, they may have a role in the bullpen, or they may be a spot starter. But I think you still have to address the bullpen as well.
Before we do address the bullpen, the big one left out there right now, Yamamoto. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say 18 teams would be in on this guy and are looking at adding this guy to their team. Where do you put the Cardinals' chances of signing a guy like Yamamoto from Japan? And where would you, I guess, where do you rank their chances of doing this, of getting that done right now after the Sonny Gray news?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's 18 teams. I think there may be 6 to 8. And the reason why I bring it up is I think the volatility of this Bally Sports contract with teams as far as the additional TV money is so up in the air. That's going to limit some teams from actually trying to go all in. So I think you have to have teams that have a sound payroll structure, teams that have something really truly to offer, and teams that can afford to take the hit. Cardinals would be one of them because their situation with Bally is a little bit more stable than others. I think there's still room for them. If you're going to make an investment on a player, you start with a guy his age and with his credentials, no injury history, anything along that line. But I think you have to be creative with the contract. You just can't hand out $25 million a year for 10 years or something along that line. I think you have to be careful in making sure that there's some opt-outs on both sides. But I think the team has to find a way to say if there aren't certain incentives made as far as innings pitched and things of that nature, then you have the opportunity to reopen things or maybe opt out of the contract. Now, we haven't seen a lot of that, but I think at some point the owners have to take back negotiations because they're giving the house away too often.
How much does a relationship like Yamamoto have with Lars Nootbaar kind of help the Cardinals in negotiations like this?
Well, is it the negotiations with Nootbaar? I mean, relationship with Nootbaar, the fact that Yamamoto's agent is also Nolan Arenado's agent. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that has more of an impact than the fact that he and Nootbaar played 5 weeks together, if that much. I think that's vastly overblown. It's nice that he knows him. but I'm not sure if that's going to be the reason why he ends up coming to St. Louis because of a guy he just met.
Explain because everybody knows that you have the history of being agent negotiation, stuff like that. So explain to me why it is such a positive that Yamamoto and Nolan Arenado share the same agent in a situation like this.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take our first break and we'll come back and talk about it?
All right, will do. This is the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show here on Claibs Online, powered by Ameren, powered by Gray Bar, and driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura here on Claibs Online.
Are you ready for a challenging and rewarding career? There are quality jobs in the construction industry.
I got out of college and my career choices were very limited, and this provided me with a plan for the present and the future at the same time.
I actually have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was making less than I make as a first-year apprentice painter.
I didn't go to college. I have no college debt. I make more money than the majority of people I know that went to college.
Take your first step towards a rewarding career. Visit stlouispdf.org.
Back here on the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura. Joe Roderick, Mike Claiborne here with you. And if you're just jumping in and joining us and haven't seen the news today, the Cardinals signed Sonny Gray to a 3-year deal, $75 million to put him at the top of their 2024 rotation. And prior to that commercial break, we were talking about the relationship that Yoshibo Yamamoto, his agent, Nolan Arenado agent, same guy. And Claibs, what benefits does that have in a negotiation like this?
Well, it has a little bit of a benefit because of the fact that the agent knows the team and the organization. His player is one of the top players on the team. That there's a plus to that. But each individual contract is negotiated differently. The reason Joel Wolf has Yamamoto is because he's going to be his American or North American representative. He's going to have a representative from Japan that handles things there. Joel Wolf did a nice job in recruiting him, getting in on him early. So I think there's a little bit of an advantage, but I'm sure of those other 8 teams that I think that are actually in it, they all have an excuse too on why they feel like they have a shot, whether it's the weather or the location, or maybe they have Japanese players on the team. And I would remind people the Cardinals have dealt with players from the Far East before. So this isn't a situation where like, well, what do we do? How do we recruit them? They've already done that before. So that's a plus for them as well. But overall, I really feel like 99% of the things that we're hearing is purely conjecture. I don't think most people know what's going on behind the scenes and what attracts this 25-year-old to this country. B, what environment does he want to play in? Does he like warm weather? Does he like, Midwestern weather? Does he like certain food? I don't know. And I don't think anybody else knows. So I really feel like we're doing him in his whole negotiating process a disservice because none of us know, including the people who continue to write stuff.
Yeah. The Yamamoto, far from being the biggest Japanese name that's in free agency this year, as Shohei Ohtani. There was a report over the weekend that we could have heard some news on Saturday or Sunday. Didn't happen. Right now, as of this morning, it is being reported that the 3 teams that are all in the mix right now, Blue Jays, Dodgers, and Rangers. We know the Cubs were planning to go all in. When are you expecting to see something with names like Nola off the board, Gray off the board? When are you expecting Shohei Ohtani to go off the board? Because we're seeing a lot more movement right now than we've seen in past years when it comes to free agency.
I kind of think it'll be sooner than later. I just really feel like this is something that's probably not going to drag out into mid-January or February. Because he knows the league. Okay. That's the first thing. Secondly, he has the issue of, who is he going to be playing with and what are the chances of being better than what he left with the Angels. So I don't think there's a reason to fool around with this until, middle January. I think you can get this thing done reasonably quicker. You kind of know what the numbers could be, but I also think this. What is his role going to be? Is he going to be a dual guy throughout his career? Or is there an innings limit? I mean, there's so many things that go into this. I think the contract structure is going to be very unique here. It's not just going to be here's $500 million, just go play. I think you have to make sure you have all your bases covered. So that may be a reason why there may be a delay and maybe delay in negotiations. But I don't think I think there's more teams in it than Toronto and the other two teams you mentioned. I think there's some other teams that are going to kick the tires on this.
So next week is the meetings, the winter meetings in Nashville. Personally, for you and I, Joe West possibly gets named to the Hall of Fame for that. So that's the big news I know that we're hoping for coming out of that next week. But I think, the last few years of the winter meetings, because of lockouts and COVID and other things, they've been a little boring for you. I don't think you're going to be bored next week at the winter meetings.
Well, I'm never bored at the winter meetings because I can always find something to do. I mean, first of all, it's kind of like homecoming of all your colleagues from other teams and other organizations and the networks that you all run into. And somehow or another, we all end up finding ourselves in the same restaurant and our bar. So we catch up on that. But I agree with you. This should be a little busier because I think the urgency for teams to try and shore things up and not get into bidding wars and unneeded is not a situation they want to be in. I think the agents can probably take the temperature of the room at this point, seeing who's come off the board already between Gray and Nolan and what their contracts look like. So it shouldn't be as difficult as it's been in the past where people would just sit around and wait. And I've been critical of this before where MLB, I think, misses the point. Where the other sports, when the first day of free agency rolls around, we got some mega deals already signed. Major League Baseball wants to wait this thing out because they want to think maybe they want to drive up the price. I don't know. But I think from a fan perspective and a team perspective, you should already have done your homework on what the market should call for.
And that's what we're sitting talking about, the Cardinals rotation for next year. That big trade's still out there. That's what I said when I mentioned two possible arms for that. I think if Yamamoto's in the mix, that's one. Even if they go and they get Yamamoto, Cardinals are making a trade this offseason.
They have to.
They have got, and Derek Gould, I know, reported today 2 outfielders. You got to imagine that's Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson are the 2 outfielders that the Cardinals are shipping around. But I think they've shipped them around in the past, and they might have to go and shift who they're offering to people and see who else who other teams like if they're going to make a move like that.
Well, but I think the other thing comes into play here is maybe we take your bad deal for our bad deal. You may just be trading bad contracts, not necessarily even contracts, just people who don't fit in your organization anymore, and you might have to go that route. You're not going to give them away. That's why you qualify them. So you're going to get something out of it, but you don't know how much you're going to get. And, both those guys need to prove the fact they can stay healthy. I think that's the big concern. You don't want to acquire a guy and then all of a sudden his injury woes or your injury woes.
Mm-hmm. We will we'll see. Next week, you will be in Nashville for the winter meetings, and we will have all kinds of news, hopefully, coming out of that for next week. This is the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show, driven by Munganast St. Louis Acura. And, of course, Munganast St. Louis Acura has their Toys for Tots drive going on right now, as they do each and every holiday season. You bring a new and unwrapped toy out there to either Munganast St. Louis Acura or Munganast Burkhardt Alton Toyota at 850 Homer Adams Parkway in Alton, Illinois, and you will get a discount on services available out there at either of the Munganast locations. You can check it out online at stlouisacura.com or altontoyota.com for more information. Claibs, over the weekend, we had NFL and we had college football as well. I saw this tweet from you over the weekend. I now think I've seen it all. I believe, was that in reference to CM Punk returning to the WWE on Saturday nights? Because that's what everybody was talking about Saturday.
I don't know anybody who was talking about that. So I'm talking about Alabama and Auburn. You and your wrestling crew might have been talking about it, but I don't know anybody who's in the wrestling anymore. So that you on a whole nother planet.
Hey, there were 17,000 selling out the Allstate Arena on Saturday night. That were all involved in it.
Well, good for them. All 17,000.
I imagine the ratings on Raw tonight's going to hit about 3 million. So that's even more that'll be tuned into that.
When you think about who's playing tonight between the Bears and Minnesota, I don't blame you. I'd be watching a rerun of wrestling too.
Not a rerun. It's live every week.
I might even watch it then if that's okay.
I look forward to getting texts from you when that happens. But Alabama, Auburn, every time. I mean, for as bad as Auburn is, as good as Alabama is, those two teams meet up and they put on a show once again Saturday night.
As they used to say, just throw all the records out of the window when these two teams face each other. But how do you look at the play that broke their back. Okay, you have 9 people in the secondary, 3 guys in the middle, 3 guys on the left, 3 guys on the right, and the guy still catches a pass. The mistake they made was they gave the quarterback too much time. They should have had more than 2 guys rushing. But that's the way Auburn has been all year. I mean, poor coaching, just some bad tackling, not using timeouts effectively. That's who Auburn is, and Alabama took advantage of it. So here's a question for you. What happens if Alabama beats Georgia?
Let's get it, because right now you have Georgia that's undefeated. You still have Washington that's undefeated. You have Florida State that's undefeated, and you have Michigan that's undefeated. Of those teams right now, if any of those 4 lose this weekend, which one would be eliminated from the Final Four?
Florida State.
Okay.
I think they'd be out because of the loss of their quarterback. And, they played hard this weekend, but let's face it, if they get further along, they may have a bigger problem. Washington has been an intriguing team all year. I'm trying to figure out who they actually beat. I mean, they beat Colorado. Yeah, Colorado finished last in the Pac-12. All right, congratulations. So, but that doesn't take away from their body of work.
They beat Oregon. They beat Oregon.
Yeah, they beat Oregon. And, but here's the thing. I guess maybe because we don't see the Pac-12 as much, we always used to wonder, how good are they? They find a way to compete, but, they don't really play anybody east of the Rockies. And so I think sometimes that hurts them with regard to assessing how good their skill level is.
But and Oregon's another one. Right now, Oregon, they're ranked, 6th? And their only losses to Washington. So if Oregon beats Washington this weekend,
what happens with them?
What do you do with that?
I think it's going to be I'm a guy who likes anarchy when it doesn't affect me. And I kind of love the way this thing is shaking out. And it just begs on why you should expand the playoff system, because these are credible teams. But somebody's going to have to watch the championship series on TV. So the other question is, somebody in front of Missouri is going to lose. All right. It's just going to happen. Where does that put Missouri with regard to a bowl game?
I mean, right now, any other year you look at it, top 10 teams, they're either in the semifinals or in a New Year's Six game.
Well, Missouri's in a New Year's Six game. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I mean, Andy Staples of Sports Illustrated yesterday came out with his projected bowl season or New Year's Six games, and he did not have Missouri in his New Year's Six games.
Well, there's 6 games, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that means 12 teams are playing, right?
Yes.
If you're ranked 10th, in one poll, 9th in another, wouldn't that include? I mean, what team behind Missouri deserves a better spot in a 6 game than Missouri?
He has Georgia, Florida State, Michigan, and Oregon. He has those as his that is his Final Four that he has. So he's predicting that Oregon beats Washington this weekend. He then has Louisville against Ohio State, Oklahoma against Washington, Texas against Ole Miss, and then Tulane against Alabama.
Remind me not to read this guy.
So he has Ole Miss and Oklahoma and Louisville jumping Mizzou to go play this game. And Tulane gets in because they're the mid-major they get that automatic bid for being the top ranked mid-major. So on top of all this too, he's also telling that's an issue I have. If you were to say Penn State gets in over Mizzou, I'd be okay with that. Penn State's 2 losses are to the second and third best team in college football going into this past weekend, where one of Mizzou's losses was to LSU at home. So Penn State has 2 better losses than Mizzou has.
Too. Yeah.
That I'd be fine with that, making that argument. This one though, not cool with that.
Well, fortunately, he doesn't select. He's just making a suggestion and an observation. But I think the selection committee and the bowl committees really have some interesting teams to choose from. And I think the other thing that goes into this is who moves the needle from an offensive standpoint, who travels well. I think Missouri would travel well to one of these games on New Year's Day because they haven't done it in a while. So, it's one of those deals where everybody's ramped up. I think they've shown that by the attendance that they've had this year. So I just think the sooner they know, the easier it is for them to make the reservations to go to one of these 6 bowl games. So, but to have Missouri, not included makes no sense. And I get it because maybe he's thinking of tradition. Oklahoma's been there. Who were the other teams that were behind Missouri? I don't know how you can put Ole Miss behind them.
Louisville, Ole Miss were the other ones. Yeah.
No, neither one of those teams match up with Missouri. So, again, maybe another reason why we don't read this guy.
Next year, when we do move to the expanded playoff, because right now, looking forward to conference championship weekend, this is an extended version of that playoff, but it's also putting it in the hands of others to decide who moves on after this weekend. Is conference championship weekend going to be as exciting next year with the expanded playoffs?
I'm sure it will be. It's just like the selection committee for basketball. You sit on the edge of your seat and you're trying to figure out, okay, we know who the 4 teams are going to be, but then we have to figure out where we rank these other teams for bowl considerations. But yeah, I think it'll still have some interest because there's always how many they expanded to how many next year?
Is it go to
6?
I thought it was more than that. I thought it was 12, wasn't it?
Well, it won't be that much drama.
Yeah.
Because the 13th rated team is 13th rated for a reason. They're not good enough. And they wouldn't have an impact on winning the championship. So I don't see where that's going to happen. So the answer to your question, no.
Yeah, 12-team playoff next year is what they expand to.
Yeah.
So
like I said, the 13th team that's still on the outside looking in, hey, you know what? All you have to do is win one more game.
Yeah.
That's what it would come down to. So I don't think it would have the impact.
No, you'd be looking at it this year. I mean, you'd have the argument. You'd look at it. The 13th ranked team this year is Oklahoma. So, I mean, you look at Oklahoma up for all of those teams, and that's what you'd be looking at. And if you gave a team like Tulane an automatic bid to this, you would be taking away 2 of these teams between probably Mizzou, Louisville, Penn State, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma. You'd be taking away 2 of those teams. So conference championship game doesn't matter as much, but a regular season game, if you add that extra regular season game, that does kind of become a bigger deal
right.
then. Yeah.
I agree with you. But, here's the other thing. I think sometimes we get caught up with the name on the jersey. We look at the tradition that they had. It may not be the case. And Oklahoma's a good example. I mean, Oklahoma's been a storied program for a number of years. They haven't won anything recently. I mean, they haven't found themselves playing that final game of the season. You have some other teams that are like that as well that we've known to be competitive over the years. But hey, man, everybody's competitive now. Missouri's a good example. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at their body of work and what they've done today compared to what they did when they had the glory years, so to say.
Let's take another break. When we come back, we got to talk NFL. 40 minutes into the show, haven't mentioned a whole lot of NFL, and we have still have 1 game left tonight. A few good games yesterday on the schedule to go over here on the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura here on ClaibsOnline.com.
Let me get this straight. Gray Bar is a distributor?
Yep. For more than 150 years, we supported electrical and datacom projects all over the country.
So you can get me products wherever and whenever I need them?
Yep. Thanks to our expansive national logistics network.
For any industry?
Yep. From construction sites and industrial plants to schools, hospitals, and just about everything in between.
So you could say Gray Bar is much more than a distributor?
Yep. You could say that.
They really do it all.
Yep. When you need a hand powering, connecting, or maintaining your operations, join the thousands of professionals who rely on Gray Bar to help keep them up and running. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
Back here on the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Ameren, Illinois, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura. Also coming up this on Claibs Online this week, huddle up with Howard to talk NFL and the conference championship games. The 10-2 Missouri Tigers. Howard was telling me how he correctly predicted the only 2 losses of the Mizzou season when he and I did the show last week, and I asked him if he's responsible for those 2 losses then, because if he could have predicted everything right.
He saw it coming. He knew what was up. Yeah.
I mean, all he had to do was predict a win over LSU, and then Mizzou's right there in the conversation in the top 5 right now. So it could be Howard's fault that Mizzou lost 2 games this year if all of his predictions were correct.
There is a swirling momentum that supports your statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure where this is going to go with regard to Howard's future or not, but I couldn't even get it out. I couldn't even get it out. I was trying to be straight-faced about it, but it is what it is.
That's something we feed to Frank to put on the Smooth on Friday. That's what give that to Frank and let him run with it and give him a whole week to write it into the script. But hey, you mentioned earlier Bears and Vikings final game of Monday Night Football this weekend. But yesterday, a good Monday night or a good Sunday night game of the week though. You had the Eagles and the Bills. Again, that Eagles schedule, man, every week. I mean, they are the top team in the NFL.
They're not ducking anybody.
No, the NFL schedule makers did them 0 favors with who they're going up against this year. My goodness.
They haven't missed any good teams. They've been reasonably healthy, and they're tough at the line of scrimmage on both sides. Man, they get it done. And I know I was listening to somebody brought up Brock Purdy's name as being the MVP, and I'm saying to myself, how can you even fathom the notion of Brady when Jalen Hurts has been the ultimate difference maker on his team, what he's able to do, his leadership and everything that comes with it. I mean, there's a reason why somebody thought enough to pay him the kind of money that he got. And I can see why. That team might be as well-rounded as any team in the National Football League. I just think the key for them is, man, just not getting hurt down the stretch.
I mean, the past 5 weeks, they beat Miami, they beat Dallas, they beat Kansas City, they beat Buffalo. Next week, they have San Francisco. The week after that, Dallas. The week after that, Seattle. And somehow the one loss on their schedule this year has come to the New York Jets.
Do they have Arizona? Don't they have Arizona? No, they don't have Arizona.
They have Arizona. Yeah, they have Arizona on New Year's Eve. They have Arizona.
Oh, boy. Talk about blowing out some candles that night.
They already lost to the Jets, though. So, I mean, can you say Arizona's a lock?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think they've learned from that. I think the
Okay.
key for the Eagles is not playing to the level of competition. And Arizona's awful. I mean, we have some really putrid teams in the league.
They still have 2 games
Arizona.
against the Giants. The Eagles still have not played the Giants yet this year either.
You got the Arizona, the Giants, Charlotte. Who else is out there that's really bad? San Diego. I mean, I think we're going to probably see 4 or 5 guys lose their jobs this year.
We already saw
Chicago.
one today. Frank Wright fired
Who
by
should
the
have never got the job.
Carolina Panthers this morning.
Who should have never got the job. And so that
That's
was
2 now. That's the second. So Josh McDaniels already got fired this year. Now you have Frank Wright. So already 2 firings before December.
San Diego, you're going to make a move on. I don't think there's any doubt you got to make a move in San Diego. You made a move in Carolina. I don't know if things work out in Buffalo. If they go in a tailspin, they may make a change there. You look around, there's some other places you probably give them one more year, like a Tampa. I think I think he's a goner. Those are just names right off the top that I look at that I just don't see how they're going to survive. Now, I'll tell you a guy who I'm impressed with and how he's turned things around is coaching Denver and what he's been able to do. Remember, they got out to such a terrible start. Everybody thought he and Russell, I can't think of the guy's last name now.
Wilson?
Yeah, Russell Wilson. They weren't getting along, but man, you look at them now, man, they're balling.
Yeah.
They're playing some really good, solid football. So, but this happens every year. I mean, one thing about the NFL is you're going to get fired. And I didn't even mention Bill Belichick. I don't see how Bill Belichick sticks around New England again because they've got nothing, and they have nothing coming in the future either. The Mac Jones experiment has failed. The defense is average. The offense is non-existent, and it's just not a good product.
I'm glad you mentioned Belichick because I wanted to bring up Greg Popovich this weekend. They seem to be two guys, same situation, so long with their teams. Did you see the Popovich, what
Yeah, I
happened with
saw
him
it.
the other night,
Yeah.
grabbing the microphone during the game? Your thoughts on that?
I understood what he was doing because Kawhi Leonard was a valuable player to that organization. Now, Kawhi Leonard had his own issues about how management was treating him, but Greg Popovich is very close to his players, whether they're in another uniform or not. And I know what he was trying to do. It didn't work. It was unfortunate, but that's why guys like playing for Greg Popovich, man, because he has your back, especially if you make the effort. Again, it didn't work because fans are different, man. They don't care anymore. I mean, you may get away with that in a college game, but I think in a pro game, you can't do it because it doesn't work.
Yeah, that it didn't seem like it was something that needed to be done there. You've never seen a coach in the middle of the game do it, and
no, we've seen it done before, but we've seen it
not
on
for
college
that,
level,
not for booing.
Yeah, college level, you've seen it, but at this level, it's very rare, very, very rare.
Have you? I mean, I know you were talking. You brought it up with Ahmad. How invested are you right now with the NBA this year?
I'm paying attention to it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, with each day, I have more interest. But yeah, I can kind of tell you who I like so far. There's, the NBA Western Conference is stacked, man. There's only a couple of teams in the West that have no chance. Portland has no chance. You have some teams that are still trying to get some people back from injury, like Phoenix. Bradley Beal has not been able to contribute to the level that I think they expected him to. Lakers have had some injuries. The Clippers are trying to figure out how to play with James Harden. You have Denver, who's just like quietly just doing what they've been doing. Utah is a team that's still trying to find their way. There's some good teams over there. Golden State's a team that's trying to figure it out. I think maybe they stayed a year too long, and I don't think Chris Paul can help them. They don't have enough size as it is. So, yeah, it's been interesting. And then you look at the East, Boston is the cream of the crop. Milwaukee is trying to find their way, as is Philadelphia. And then you have Miami, who just goes out and guards people when they need to. And then Indianapolis Pacers fill out that second tier of teams that can make it interesting, along with Atlanta. So there's a number of good teams out there. There are very few teams that are already out of it. I tell you, the team over in the East you might want to start paying attention to is the Orlando Magic. They've been able to hold on to some of their draft choices, and now those guys are starting to come into shape. And they can get away with it in the Eastern Conference, which isn't as deep as the West. So there are some teams that I think if they can stay together by the middle of January, they can make this an interesting run.
And wrapping up here with the Blues tonight up in Minnesota, they have to rebound in some way after what they did on Friday afternoon against the.
Well, they won yesterday. They beat the Hawks. I mean, the Hawks aren't very good. They're just very young.
Eight goals given up to Nashville on Friday afternoon.
Well, here's the problem with the Blues. We have too many guys who you've heard of the Lady Byng Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's for sportsmanship, kind of like a softy trophy. Lady Byng would be turning over her grave if she saw the Blues play in the way they are on certain nights, because they have no desire to make any sort of physical commitment. And it's sad because there are a couple of guys, and I think Craig Berube has sent a couple of messages when he took Kyrou off the number one line. Kyrou played reasonably well yesterday. But, and then you have Jake Neighbors. We talked about him last week. Here's a guy who's a first-round draft choice who's playing on the fourth line. Well, they move him up, and now he's starting to play better. But, man, there just isn't enough physical commitment from enough players on this team. So you're going to have those nights. And the goaltending is average, okay? I don't care how good the Blues are in front of the goal. They're average. And I don't see them getting any better until everybody comes together as a team. And how they do that, I don't know, because – you just don't know what night you're going to see the real St. Louis Blues.
We will wrap up the show for this week. Claibs, what do you have planned for us before you head over to Nashville this weekend?
Well, we're going to visit with Howard Richards a little later in the week, talk some football with him, because there's really not much to do now that their regular season is over with. So now you have to kind of look toward what the bowl situation will look like. Try and talk a little hockey later in the week, as well as the Blues are trying to figure their way along with the National Hockey League. And maybe we'll get some NBA flavor working a little later this week as well. This is kind of a hectic week for a lot of different sports. I'm waiting on the college basketball season to be serious because if I see St. Louis U and Mizzou play another blood donor, well, first of all, I'm
going to the SLU game tomorrow night. They're welcoming in Utah State,
which could give St. Louis U some problems.
Yeah, Utah State 5-1 on the year. Yeah. So
I'm gonna check in the SIU game.
Okay.
It's a day game. I think it's in Carbondale. I'm gonna go down there with Ed Curtis and Lance Lynn and I going. We did that once before, and it was one of the more epic journeys I've taken. So we're looking forward to doing that again. So that's what we have coming up. And as you well know, if something pops, we'll be here to talk about it.
Absolutely. Rammer and I plan to bring you a daily cards to talk about the Sonny Gray deal. And I know Rammer also will be putting out a new episode of a 2-man game with he and Matt Rocchio. I believe that's coming out later on this afternoon too. So until then, he is Mike Claiborne. I'm Joe Roderick. This has been the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show here on Claibs Online, powered by Gray Bar, powered by Munganash St. Louis Acura. We'll talk to you later.
There's always been a bright side to living in downstate Illinois. Ameren, Illinois is making it even brighter with a little help from the sun. Right now, we're building a next-generation solar facility to bring you cleaner energy for generations to come. It's good for the environment, your neighborhood, and everyone living in downstate Illinois. That's brighter thinking. That's energy at work. Learn how you can participate in solar programs at amerenillinois.com/renewables.